Welcome everyone to the Weddings and Funerals Recap. I thought about titling this For Weddings and Funeral, but then I wasn't sure how many of you had seen that film, and so I thought that'll just be confusing. Okay, very briefly, I'd like to start by returning quickly to the question of why is it that we study weddings and funerals together? Well, of course, it's because these are liminal phases, moments of transition in ancient Greek social life, right? They mark the passage from childhood to adulthood for marriages, especially for women, and of course from the realm of the living to the realm of the dead. And so central are these liminal phases that they occupy the center of a lot of ancient Greek artwork. Think of the vases we looked at, and Greek literature. And finally, they're helpful media in which to think about how families connect, express their identity, and even compete with each other in the classical polis, that is the city-state. Okay, I got the sense from my graduate instructors that what you guys wanted was a bit of a recap on the actual rituals, the phases of weddings and funerals. And I want to start by first emphasizing that these phases, to some extent, are scholarly constructs. I don't think if we went back in a time machine and asked an ancient Greek woman or man, if you're going to have a funeral or a wedding, how do you do it? I don't think they necessarily would have said, well, there's 3 exact phases that you have to follow step by step. But these are rather the sort of stages by which we organize our thinking about ritual. When it comes to weddings, what we are really leading up to are 3 stages towards the gamos, the wedding day. We're beginning with our betrothal, our engagement phase. And here I really tried to emphasize in my lecture that this is not so much just a serendipitous romantic bond between a man and a woman, but rather a contract between families, between kinship ties. This involves the male members of either family, the groom and his male relatives, and the bride's kurios, her guardian figure. It could be a father or even an older brother or uncle. There is money at stake, especially for elite families. In Homer, we see the hedna, right, the bride gift, when a royal prince like Hector wants to marry a foreign princess Andromache, he's going to have to pay for the privilege. But in the classical period, when we see city-states trying to keep their young men and women marrying at home within local families, we see that fathers are passing on an inheritance of a fairne, a dowry, right, a bridal investment into the household of her groom. When we reach the stage of preparation, here we're mostly talking about the preparation of the bride herself. For the bride, to a much greater extent than for the groom, marriage marks a transition from childhood to adulthood. And so a lot of the rituals that she will undergo are really about preparing her body, her face, her identity for a new self. That can involve the ritual bathing, the cutting of hair, the sacrifice of a virginal belt or girdle on the altars of Athena or Artemis to mark the clear end of the virginal phase. And then, of course, it involves wrapping the bride in linen, veiling her with other fineries and cloths. And the removal of that veil after the wedding will, of course, be an important signal of her new self, right? I have been renewed. I have crossed the threshold to my new identity. The wedding night itself, as we talked about, starts in the home of the bride's family, right, with a major feast. Family members are invited to witness this union of bride and groom. But importantly, that evening feast will come to an end with the physical transfer of bride and groom to his home. There will be a wedding procession through the streets of the polis. The bride and groom will be pulled by a mule cart, accompanied by song, by procession, by torchbearers. And when they arrive at that new home, they'll finally have a moment of intimacy, of coupledom, where the bride's veil will be removed and the wedding night will be consummated. The family will re-enter the picture one more time at the athaulia, the morning greeting, when family members come to the groom's home to see the new couple as a new married unit and to further give the bride, presumably domestic gifts, food goods, to start her new home and her new identity as a bride, right, as a married woman within the city. As we turn to funeral rituals, we saw also in class the way we tried to sort of think about funerals as a three-stage process. And again, what we're seeing is similar themes of preparation, procession, and then the sort of consummation of the rituals with the burial. I think you guys might remember in class we did a kind of playful activity looking at art and trying to figure out what phase we were in. You might remember the prothesis, the laying out of the body, right? Similar to the preparation of the bride, we have the preparation of the corpse by women, wrapping in linen, the closing of the eyes, preparing a body to be seen, right? To be transitioned within a family, within a kinship setting. And just as with funerals, we have song. The go'os is the personal mourning of the family, right? Songs that the family members might sing. The threnos being the more professional, hired songs that you would contract out to professional mourners to show just how important this loss was to your family. In a similar way that we have a procession of the bride and groom through the city to their new home, we also, in the context of funerals, have the ekphora, the procession of the body on a wagon, on a horse or mule cart through the city streets so that the larger polis can see this member of the family being carried out, being publicly mourned, with potentially frequent stops, so that lots of different corners of the city can witness this. And then at the very last phase, of course, we have the tafe, right? Again, a more intimate moment with the family where the body might be buried or cremated. We have a lot of attestation for both in ancient Greek civilization, and in which we have the pouring of wine or the gift of offerings to sort of mark that final transition of the corpse to the underworld, right? Remember that at least in ancient Greek belief, we don't have the soul actually going to the underworld until we have completed this last phase of the funeral. And we've seen in a couple works of ancient literature that if you don't bury someone, they don't make it, right? You have to undergo the full steps of the process and complete it in order for your loved one to join the kingdom of Hades. All right, I'm going to wrap up here by pointing to a couple of other last directions for you guys to refresh yourselves on. I would really encourage you to think about the way these family rituals are integrated in and strengthen the bonds of the polis. Right, these are, for the most part, public rituals, right? Seeing the bride and groom in their wagon, seeing the corpse on its processional wagon through the city. It's also about strengthening ties between families, asserting that we are members of a polis and we want to produce legitimate children for the next generation. We also have really strong connections between the funerary process and the wedding process for women, right? Young women are in some ways letting their girlhood selves die and are being reborn in a new identity, right? In a similar sense, the funeral process is a physical death, but the soul then continues to a new form of existence in the underworld. And of course, I would really encourage you to go back and study a lot of those terms that we had on a quiz based on the week 11.1 and 11.2 slides. I can't see myself directly asking you to define anakalupterion, but I think it would definitely strengthen your answers if you could deploy and recognize some of these terms in questions and answers. All right, see you guys soon.